Hello everyone, this is the Angular introduction video. Let's understand what Angular is, why do we need to learn Angular, and some of its core features. I hope you will have a good understanding of Angular by the end of this Angular course. Angular is a web development framework. It is using HTML, CSS and TypeScript. Without having any experience with HTML, CSS or TypeScript, you can still learn and understand the Angular, but it takes a little bit of time. It is possible with the practice. Angular was developed by a team of developers from Google, and it is currently maintained by Google. So we can blindly trust the Angular framework because it is owned by Google. And one of the main competitors for Angular is React.js right now, and it is owned by Facebook. The Angular framework is written in TypeScript, but currently no browser is directly supporting TypeScript on its own. So when the Angular application is rendered in the browser, it is compiled and rendered as a JavaScript, and it is easy to debug on the browser. Angular follows the single page application model. Any web application that has a capability to dynamically update a web page with updated HTML content without reloading the page is called as a SPA or single page application. Angular has only one HTML file, and it will update the page body with a new HTML template based on the user interaction with the web page. We can develop web applications as well as mobile applications using Angular. Angular is one of the most popular UI frameworks right now, and the majority of the traditional Java-based JSP applications and .NET-based ASP applications are converting to Angular right now. All of the current new web applications are directly written in Angular because of its features. To get a job as a UI developer, either Angular or React.js is mandatory right now, and these are the trending frameworks available in the market right now. Google, Gmail, Netflix, PayPal. Not only these companies, there are a vast majority of the Fortune 500 companies are using Angular, and their applications are written in Angular. Now let's understand a few of the important Angular features. Two-way data binding. It is the core feature of Angular framework. The single page application model is possible to Angular because of two-way data binding. Two-way data binding feature always keeps modal and view are in sync with the latest values. If the modal value gets updated, automatically the view value gets updated without refreshing the page. Dependency injection. Angular provides a feature called dependency injection, which will allow the services to be injected into the components. It is the most popular design pattern, which will help Angular enable loosely coupling, and it's important in modern programming. Components. The component is a building block of Angular application. One or more components are rendered as a web page in the browser. A component is a small piece of web page, and it will have a HTML, CSS, JavaScript or TypeScript tied together. Components can have child components as well as they can share the data among themselves. Lazy loading. Angular routing is a mechanism that allows you to navigate between the different views and components in Angular application. It helps you to build single page applications by dynamically changing the content displayed on the page without reloading the entire page. Lazy loading is essential for optimizing the performance and the user experience of your application. The lazy loading, which allows developers to load modules and components on demand, which will improve the performance of the application when it is rendered on the browser. These modules are loaded dynamically when a user navigates to a route associated with that module. It will reduce the initial load time as well. Hello everyone, this is the Angular project setup video. Let's understand how to set up the first Angular application. Understand what is a node package manager and what is the purpose of it. How is it going to help us with the Angular application? And as a final step, let's run the Angular application and render the app in the browser. First of all, why do we need to install Node.js, and how is it related to Angular? Let's understand that part before installing Node.js. Angular does not need Node.js directly, and it is not mandatory to use Node.js, but you will need Node.js to build, develop, and deploy an Angular application. Let's understand Node Package Manager. So by default, when we install Node.js, Node Package Manager comes with it, and it allows you to manage your dependencies. So you don't have to worry about operations like adding a dependency or removing some of the dependencies or updating the package.json. npm gives you Angular CLI, which is a great tool for building your Angular application easily. And also Node.js allows you to spin up a lightweight web server to host your application locally on your system so that you can easily test the Angular application while developing in our local system. Before installing Angular CLI, let's understand why do we need this. Angular CLI stands for Angular Command Line Interface. As the name implies, it is a command line tool for creating Angular apps. It is recommended to use Angular CLI for creating the Angular apps, as you don't need to spend time installing and configuring all the required dependencies or wiring everything together. Angular CLI is used for much more than just creating an Angular project. It can be used to create the components or services, pipes or directives and more. Also, it helps in building, serving and testing the application. It makes the Angular development workflow much easier and faster. Now let's create our first Angular project. To create an Angular project, we use the new command, so which is ng new space the project name. For example, if you are creating first Angular application, we can write the command like ng space new space first Angular app. To run the application in local, we use ng serve command. So this is our first Angular application running on 4200 port, and you can see by default Angular starts the application on 4200, and this is our first application rendered onto the browser. See, so to start with, editor config. So this is the file. Basically, it helps to maintain the consistent coding styles across the team of developers. Meaning, like if you have 4 or 5 developers in the team who are working on this Angular project, every time when they pull the latest changes from the repository or clone the repository to their local and create the branch, so every time it will maintain the same structure and the spaces and same indentation in the Visual Studio Code, so that it will be consistent across the developers. So that is the purpose of this particular file. So the next file is git ignore. So this particular git ignore, if in real-time applications where we will have a repository like Bitbucket or maybe GitHub or any other GitLab, so when we push our changes to the repository, so there is no need to push some of the files, because these files are going to be auto-generated again when wherever we run the application, whether it is on the cloud or any other place. So there is no need to commit these files to the repository. For that reason, we have a git ignore. That means it will ignore so from the Git repository. So any file that is not relevant and no need to push through to the repository, you can give that a particular file path or file name, so that it will be ignored when we commit the code to the repository. So the next file is readme. This is just an informational file where it will show the what CLI that we are using and the folder structure and how we can run the application like ngserve, and how we can generate the component and all. This is just an informational file about this project, how to run, test and build the application. Other than that, there is no real meaning or real usage for our application with this file. So the next file is angular.json. So this is the important file and this is a configuration file for our Angular application. It will have details as configuration details like how to build and run the application for all the environments like development, testing, and production. It will have the commands like ng build or ng serve, and when we run those commands, what exactly it should do. So that particular specific configuration it will have that specific configuration it will have. So for suppose if you see new project route, which is projects, when we build the application, it will create a folder called projects. Let's just build and see how that goes. So let's build this application and see. So now, right now, so the build was done, okay? And if you see, there is a folder called dist. This one generated after we run the build, okay? So how this particular file folder was generated and how this is a minified version of the application and how it should generate and every detail and the configuration is added as part of the angular.json. If you particularly look at it, and so this is a build instruction. When we build the application, what exactly it is doing, it is going to application and going to the dist folder. It just created the dist folder. Under the dist folder, the project name, folder structure, if you see the project name, folder structure, and within this the index file and a browser like the main ts file and whatever the configuration that is needed to build. So it just followed this total instructions from this build and created the dist folder in the local. And there are some more additional configurations. If you see the budgets, which is what would be the maximum size of the project when you build. So this particular dist folder, there is a specific size, right? Memory size. So if the application is very big and it has a lot of components, when you build the application, it might go beyond this limit. So it will throw an error saying the memory is not enough. So that's when we can come here and update these numbers. And when you build it, it will work properly. And if you see the serve instruction, when we run the ng serve, these are the instructions that it will follow to run the application. If it is a development, it will use this development. If it is production, it will use production. This particular instruction. When we run serve ng serve, this command, that's when it will be triggered. So not only this, when we run the ng test, like instead of ng serve, when we run ng test, this will take this particular instruction. If you see, it is looking for the spec.json spec files configuration. This particular configuration, any file that is starting with ending with spec.json, that is a test file, and it is going to use the styles, the major style file. So this is the full instruction as how to when you run the test instruction ng test, what exactly it should follow to run this application. So that type of a configuration that we have right now in this angular.json, this is one of the most important and the configuration file. So the next file is package.json. This is one of the most important file. So in this package.json, this is the project name, and what is the version of this particular project. This will be useful if we generate a library out of this Angular project and exporting that library and publishing into our internal repository or maybe Git repository, internal library repository like Nexus repository or some other internal repository, and let the other teams or other project use your library. So for that scenario, in that case, the library, when we generate out of this particular project, it will have a folder structure as a library name, and this is going to be the version of that particular library. But right now, these are just a name and a version. Okay, and this script section, in this scripts we provide the instructions of how to run this particular application or how to build the application or how to test. So in the previous discussion, we looked at the build instruction within the angular.json, right, where we have serve, build, and test instructions. These are the instructions. When we run this, it will go to the angular.json and it will run that specific instruction accordingly, and the instructions that are provided in these scripts. And the next one is, there are two type of dependencies for Angular. So these are the mandatory dependencies. That means without these dependencies, application is not going to run at all. And these are optional dependencies that are useful when we run the application or when we test the application in local, and even for the development purpose only. But even without having these dev dependencies, application is going to still run properly without any issues. And in these dependencies, all the dependent packages for our project, we are going to make an entry, and it will download that specific package into node modules folder. We'll talk about the node modules later. And for suppose if you want to add one more new package that you want to use within your project, you need to make an entry here, or you can run npm install -- save and the package name, so that it will automatically make the entry into this particular package.json file. So the next important file is package log.json. So whatever the dependencies that we added as part of the package.json. So for suppose we said 17.2.0, right? Package log.json, whatever the version that is exactly downloaded into node modules, meaning whatever the exact version that is used for our application to build and run, same entry of that specific version it will maintain the record of each and every package that is used in our application, including the exact version number. Okay, so when we run this application in local, if it is working fine, and delete a package log.json file and push it to repository, and somebody else pull the latest changes to their local, and when they run npm install, this package log might change based on the latest version that is available in the node npm. It might get the latest version and it might not work in their local. So that's why this is a file that is important, and we shouldn't ignore this file. We should commit this file to the repository, so that other people who are pulling the changes in your team, they will also get the same version when they install, so that application works on both the computers, even the test environment or production environment also. So the most important folder in this is src. So this is where all the actual templates and actual application files are going to be located. And so we will look at it one by one. So if we expand this app folder, so this app module file, it will have all the dependent modules and imported modules for our application. For suppose if you see, there is the app routing module, which is providing the Angular routing feature to this application without importing this module. If you try to write the routing from navigation from one page to another page, it won't work. So if you want to use the Angular forms, like input the text box and all these things, it won't work directly unless you import the forms module from Angular. So any module that you want to use from Angular, or any third party or custom module, and it should have an entry here in the import, so that it will be available to the application. And the next file is app.component.ts. This is a main important file, and first file that is loaded, and whatever the content that we have in the app component will be rendered by default on the first page of the application. If you see app HTML file, whatever we have in this file, that's what is rendered when we actually started the application. So let me start the application one more time just to show you. So now the application is up and running, right? So this content, whatever the content on the default route, like 4200, this is the default application route to our application. This is the default route. Okay. And by default, this particular app component content is rendered, right? Okay. So this is coming from this app.component.html. I think this one taking it as a project. Okay. Yeah. If you see hello on the title, this title is coming from app component. This is the folder structure is the title. So on the first page of the application, hello folder structure, this is what is rendered. So by default, app.component.ts is going to be rendered, and I'll show you how this is rendered and how this particular file is bootstrapped as a first page. Okay, and we can even add a route in the routing file, app routing.module.ts file, and we can directly route to the different component also, instead of directly rendering the app component. And app component.css, this is a CSS file where we can make all the entries of the CSS classes and that are applied to the app component.html file. So only the relevant CSS classes for this HTML should be added here. So this is a component specific, that means app.component. These three files are related to app.component, and spec file is a test file. If you have a Jasmine or Karma test cases that you want to write, so those test cases will go under this particular file. And the next important file is routing. So this is a route file. Routing meaning navigating from one page to another page in the Angular. All the routes that we want to use in our application, we should make the entry of the routes here. Within this, like a URL, and you can say login and component. Login component. If you have a component, right now I didn't create any component, that's why it is throwing error. Otherwise, this is how it should be, and we should make the entries of all the routes here, so that based on the route, it will navigate to that particular component. Okay, the next folder is assets. So this particular assets folder, it will have we can add only the images or like videos, only the static content that we can place here, that is available to the app folder. This is the app folder, is the actual application that is going to be rendered, right? If you want to use any image or video or something which is static, we can keep that in the assets file folder, so that it will be available to the app folder. So the next important one is node modules. If you look at the node modules, it has all the libraries that are downloaded right now. So these libraries are downloaded based on what entries that we added in the package.json. So when we run npm install, it will download all these dependent libraries into node modules. And even if you delete this particular node modules, you can still run npm install and it will create that file again. If you see, the file came back again, and it is installing all the dependent libraries. It is the local repository to run our application locally. Okay. So the next important file is tsconfig.json file. So this particular file, it will have the TypeScript configuration for the project, since Angular is of a TypeScript framework. So how this TypeScript should be rendered, and what kind of a ES version it should use. All these things specific to TypeScript configuration that we are going to add in this particular file. Usually in real time, we don't make much changes to this particular file. And the next one is, the next important file is index, favicon icon. This is the icon, Angular icon, that is displayed on the UI, basically this particular icon and this particular icon, favicon. So this is just a plain static icon. And if you see, the next file is index.html. So it is the main file that is rendered to the browser, and the content of this file is going to be replaced based on the user navigation in the application. And even if you see this particular Angular application, if you see, this is the HTML file that is rendered. So this is the main HTML file. Within this HTML file, there is a body. Within the body, that app component is rendered right now. Okay. And if you see this particular app route, this is the place where the app component is rendered right now. Within the app route. And if you see the app component, there is a selector called app root, right? App root. That means in the index.html, we are referring to that particular app root, because we are referring to, basically when we run the application, this index.html is going to be rendered based on the instructions in angular.json. If you see the index, so index.html, this is the file that is going to be rendered first. Within this file, there is a body, and within the body, we are referring to app root, which is app component.ts, which is, we are referring to this particular app root. For that reason, app root component, whatever the content within this app root is rendered onto the UI. So that's why we are seeing this app component content on the main page. So that's how the routing is done to the main app component project app component file. Okay. And one more important file is main.ts. So this particular file, if anybody coming from the Java background, they are already aware of main method within the Java class. So that is the main entry point to the application or a program. So similarly, the main.ts file is the entry point for Angular application. And if you see, it is bootstrapping app module. This is the entry point for the application. Component is a building block of Angular application, and one or more components working together and rendering onto the web browser will become a web page. So this is a little bit tricky to understand. So let's understand a component with a real-time example. So to create a component, we have to use ng-generate component. I'll just create it like a child component. Child component, the one that we created, this is child component. So this is how it will be. If you see the component ts file, okay, this is a spec file. If you see the component ts, the selector name is app child. So that is the reason I used app child here. Right now there is nothing. So to pass the, for suppose, let's just keep a child string like, okay, let's first check whether the child is rendered. So now the child is rendered in the parent component. How you see parent and child is, if you just inspect and see, so app root, this is a pager parent component. And just to check, if you see, this is a parent component. Within the parent component, we added this child component. Okay. So that's why under the app root, you are seeing child component. It is within the app root. Okay. Now what we will do is we'll just get rid of this one and we'll say hello. We'll add the name. I'll just pass the name to this child. We'll say okay. Let's just put this in H2 just to see it better. Now we need to pass this name from the parent component. Okay. So to pass the parent component, a child. So it is, this is how you should pass the name, the value. Directly you can give the value here like this, but you need to get hold of this name value in the child TypeScript class. So to get hold of the input parameter that is coming from parent, this is how you should use. Okay, now we are passing a parameter name to the child. So to get hold of the value that is coming from the parent, you should use @input, and by default it is empty. But when we are, since we are passing this value to the name, so when we render this child component, it will get hold of that whatever the value that is passed, and it will replace in this particular place. Okay, so now let's check. Okay, there is some issue. Let's see. Okay, there is something wrong. Okay, let's check what is wrong. So this is correct. This is correct. Okay, let's see how we are passing. Okay, what we will do is, oh, okay, there is one single quote is missing. Now it should come. Okay, yeah. Now if you see this name that is passed for the parent, but it is the string that is rendered from child. Let's check. So if you see, this is a child component and this is a parent component. So if you select the child component, it is selecting the exact child component. So this is child and the whole parent is here. So this is how we should pass the value from the parent, which is app component, to the child, app child. Now that we passed a single string, okay, let's try to pass multiple values. How we can pass array of values to the child. Okay, to pass either directly we can put it here, but it's not going to look good. So what we will do is we'll name it like names list and we'll pass it from this component class. Okay, how we can pass array, let's say Shiva Kumar. So we have two values now. We need to maybe append first name and last name and show it in the child component. Now it is the array, so it will get the array of values. And let's go to the child component. Now it's not going to be a single string. Okay, so we have to set it like array, and now let's change it to names list. Okay, let's go to the parent and we'll change the name. It is not just a single name. So now let's change it to names list. We'll get hold of this names list here. And we'll just say any type, or you can directly give string since it is string. Okay, let's just keep it any for now. Now that we got list, we cannot directly give it like this. Okay, let's just check how this is going to behave. It is working, but still, if you have more number of people, okay, right now this is working. We passed a couple of values. We'll try to pass a different type of thing. Okay, a different type of array. So what we will do is in the parent component, we'll give a object array. We'll say first name and last name. Now that this is an object array, let's see what is happening. Now you see, since it is object, it is not showing the values. So what we need to do is to display the object array. This is not going to work. So for that, we have to use ng for. Okay. This names list. And now that we get each name, now we can simply say name dot first name. We will give a comma and a name dot last name. Okay, now you see the object is passed and we showed this. And let's see how we can pass more number of values. Now we can simply say let's see how this is going to behave now. Now you see it is repeated twice for two values. Why? Because you see the child component, this we are iterating and printing this whole h2 content twice because of the for loop. We have two records. Okay, so now this is how we can pass the single string value and a list of values in the array and list of objects from parent to child. The major important thing is @input selector, and based on the type of the value that you are giving, you have to say whether it is a string or array. And from the parent, when you go to the parent class, this is how you should pass the values to the child. Thank you. See you in the next video. So now that we looked at how we can pass the data from parent to the child. So now let's look at how we can pass the data from child to the parent. Okay, right now we have a child which is app child, and the app component is a parent component. So let's pass the data from child component to the parent component now. Okay, so what we can do is, let's add a button, and we'll add a click event. So what we will call this is emit value to parent. Okay, and so we should have something over here in the parent child class. For this particular function, when we click that button, let's check whether we got the button, or we have the button but we don't have anything. Okay, let's give a name, emit value to parent. Okay, now you see this is the button. When you click it, it should send the value to the parent. Okay, so now that we got the function, okay, now this is a function. So when we click this one, first thing, to send a value, so to get the value from the parent to child, we used input. Right now, to send the value from child to parent, we need to use output, output, and you can say, since we are performing some action and sending the value to the parent, so we'll call it as a event emit or some name. This name can be anything we can use, and new event emitter. We have to use event emitter to send the value to the parent, and we'll just simply send the string value to the parent. And let's import this output. So now within this, when we click that button, so this dot event emitter dot emit is a function which will send the value to the parent. So what we will send is just simply say, okay, this message will send it to the parent. To get hold of this in the parent, what we need to do is, we need to, for this app child, this is a child, right? It should come through the child to the parent. So for that reason, we need to add an event. So this event name should be same as this one. Okay, otherwise it won't emit the value to the parent. So when this one is triggered, we'll handle in this particular parent. So since we are sending a value to the parent, we must use $event. So this event will get hold of the value. Okay, once we got the value, we need to print it to the parent, right? So for that, within the parent component, we should write this function, and it will get the event that is passed, which is of string. And now we can print this one. So initially we will just calling it as a message from parent. Okay, so we'll call it as a message. We'll just simply say it is empty, and this dot message equal to whatever the value that came from child, and we'll try to print this one in the parent component. Let's print it here, and we'll just say h1 just to highlight it. Let's see. Okay, capital string and small string. Let's check. This is a small string. Let's format it. It is a small string. Okay, it is a capital string, so that's why it is throwing error. Let's make them same string. Okay, now when I click this is the child. This value should come to the parent. Right now it is not visible. When I click it, if you see, this value came from child. Okay, so if you see this particular value, it is in child component. Okay, this value, when I click this button, what is happening when I click this button in the child, we are calling this particular function within this EventEmitter.emit. Emit is which is sending the value out, it is pushing. Okay, whoever is subscribed to this EventEmitter, by default they'll get the value. Okay, who is subscribed to this event? Let's see. In the parent component, this is the parent component, and in this parent component, this is where the this is where we are getting hold of that event. So we are getting hold of this event and we are calling this particular function and passing that event to this. So since we are passing this event to this, and it is here, and it will get hold of the event which is string value, and we are assigning this value to a message field, and we are using this message field to print on this particular parent component. This is how you can pass a value from a child component to the parent component. Okay, now let's see how we can pass a list of values from the child to the parent. Okay, now that when we click this one, what we will do is, instead of emitting single value, we will emit an array of values. Okay, let's say this is one value, this is second value. Okay, so now that we name it as string, that's why it is not taking array. Now what we can do is, we can say this string of array. What we'll do is, we will simply say any value you can pass. Okay, we will pass this array to the parent. Now since we are passing two values, let's see how this is behaving. Okay, now we pass two values because it is just a string, it is directly printed with a message. Let's change this to pass an object kind of a thing. Okay, so now we'll say first name, last name. Now we are passing an object. Since we said any, it will accept, but in the child component, in the parent component, if you see, it will show it like an object. So we need to pass this object in the parent. So now that we go to the parent class, okay, this event, whatever the event that we, so this will, sorry, so now this handle event, this will get the object. Okay, let's put it side by side. Okay, now that we got the object here, okay, within this parent component, since this is the object, what we can do is, we can simply say event dot first name comma event dot last name. Okay, still it is throwing does not exist on a string. So this is a string that we said. Instead we change it to any. Now it will accept because it is not a string that we are passing from child. If you see here, we are passing an object array. Okay, let's pass the object, simple object first, then we'll pass the array. Now we are simply passing one single object. Okay, one single object. So this is the object, first name and last name we took those first name and last name out. Now you see it is printed first name and last name. Now let's check how we can pass array of objects. Now that we just passed single object, in this let's pass the array of objects. Okay, so this will be array. We'll pass one more object, John Doe is a second record. Now to get hold of this particular array of objects, it will be the same process, but overall when we receive it in the parent, this event is array. Now it's not a single field, it will fail. You see, it is undefined. Okay, now what we should do is, we should take this array. Okay, the event is array. So Since this is array, we can directly set this array here. Okay, and we take this message. Go here, instead of, we cannot print it like this. Instead, again, we can go for loop, name of message, let's say name dot first name and name dot last name, and it will be printed twice because array has multiple records. First name does not exist on a type string. Okay, let's check what is it. Okay, we named this one as a string, that's why it is failing. We'll say it is array. Okay, now you see we passed the first object and second object unprinted. So this is how you can share the data from child component to the parent component. In this video, let's understand how a child can share the data to the parent using ViewChild. This is one more way of sharing the data from child component to the parent component. And before that, let's understand what is ViewChild and how a parent can get hold of the child component variables and methods. And this is one more way of sharing the data from child component to parent component. And a ViewChild can be applied to plain HTML attributes like a span tag or div tag, and also it can be applied to a Angular directive directly. And even we can apply the ViewChild to its child components as well. So let's start with how we can apply the ViewChild to native HTML attributes like a span tag and div tag. Okay, let's start with that one. So right now I just created application, Angular 17 application, and if you see it is plain application, there is just a navigation bar with the name and there is nothing else. So let's start by writing the Angular attribute level ViewChild feature. So let me take a div and I'll just align the content, text align center, and within this let's add a bigger content so that it will be easy to view. So I'm adding a anchor tag, maybe I'll add welcome back to US Learning Hub, and I'll add a ID for this. So this is the plain HTML anchor tag, and now right now it is under app component. So what I'll do is I'll try to under app component, meaning it is the child of app component. So let's get hold of this child in the app component. So to use ViewChild, what we need to do is we have to use ViewChild and the name of the child. This is plain HTML content, so we are getting it. We are getting hold of this with the help of its ID. And so since it is a plain HTML element, to get hold of it, we need to use HTML element reference so that it will get hold of this particular text. Okay, and what we can do is we'll simply add a button under this. Okay, click to change color. What we'll do is within this button, when we click it, we'll change the color of the text above with using ViewChild. Okay, so now I have this. So within this, I'll get hold of the welcome text dot native element dot I think to set the style we need one more constructor we need, and within the constructor we need to get hold of the renderer. Renderer is used to set styles to a text. Renderer version 2 that we need to use. Okay, now welcome text dot native element, comma, what we can say is we'll change the color and we'll say red color, but this won't directly apply to the welcome text. Instead we need to use this renderer dot set style. Okay, now within this set style we should set this content so that it will be applied. Okay, so right now if you see this is plain. Okay, let me just push this button to the bottom. Let me just get this out. Let me add just the HR tag to be clear. Okay, now when I click this one, the color of the text is going to change. See, now the welcome back to US Learning Hub, the color changed to red, because within the parent component I'm able to, within the parent is app component, within the app component I'm able to get hold of this particular text by using ViewChild. So this is a text ID, I'm using ViewChild. Why it is ViewChild? Because it is part of the app component and it is under app component, so this will become a child to this particular app component. That's why I'm able to get hold of it by using ViewChild on that particular text ID, the ID that I used here, and I'm able to set color for this particular one to this text. And what we can do is we can even replace that text by using inner HTML. To replace it, I don't think we need the renderer, so we can say native element dot inner HTML equal to replacing welcome text. Okay, and now let's see replacing welcome text. So I'm able to get hold of this text using ViewChild, and I'm able to replace the content. I'm able to set the color for that. So this is how you can use the ViewChild for a native HTML attribute. So now let's understand how we can apply ViewChild to a directive and how we can get hold of the directive content in the parent component using ViewChild. Okay, so first and foremost thing, I'll just take a span tag and I'll just push this total content again to the center, div style text align center, and within this div I'll keep this span tag. So what I'll do is within this is my favorite food, and I'll get the favorite food from the directive. This is just a plain span tag right now. If you see, this content is just displayed, there is nothing other than that. Now let's create a directive using Angular schematics. Okay, ng generate directive, and the directive name would be food. So now the directive is created. If you see food directive, this is the directive that is created. Okay, so and this is the name that we need to use to get hold of the directive. And what I'll do is I'll set this directive here. Okay, right now it won't apply anything. It's not going to apply anything because there is nothing in the directive. So what I'll do is in this directive I'll just add a favorite field. We'll using ViewChild will get hold of this one. This is the favorite food. To get hold of this particular span tag, Okay, what we need to do is basically when we use this directive, automatically this whole span tag will be directive will get hold of the whole span tag using element. So within this element, basically element reference will get. So this is a span tag element reference, and we need a renderer version 2, and now I can get hold of the element and perform some action so that the same action will be applied on the this particular span tag, and it will be displayed along with this content. Okay, what I'll do is here element dot I'll add some text to this, create text. Oh, I think sorry, with the renderer we can create a text and create text. I'll set my favorite food as pasta here. Okay, and let I think this is the text that I created. Now I can apply this same text to the span tag using append child, and this is the text that I wanted to append to which element I wanted to append. I wanted to append to the element span tag element, and for that I need to say native element. Now within this, when we display this span tag, okay, since we added a directive, it will perform some additional action, or it will add some additional feature to the span tag. So we will get the span tag here, and within the span tag what we are doing, we are appending using the renderer, we are appending this text which is pasta. Okay, let's see how this is going to be rendered onto the UI. Now if you see, pasta is my favorite food, this is displayed. Let me just increase the content to view it easily. Okay, now if you see, pasta is my favorite food, but pasta came from this particular directive. Okay, within the directive we are getting hold of the span tag, and we are getting a plain text content and appending it as a child to this particular span tag. So because of that reason, that the pasta value came here. In fact, the pasta value came in front of is my favorite food. Okay, right now so far we didn't use any ViewChild. Okay, now let's try to get hold of the ViewChild and get hold of the directive method, directive property favorite food. Okay, we'll try to get hold of this one using ViewChild. Okay, now within this, to get hold of the directive, ViewChild of the directive food directive, I wanted to get hold of the food directive. Okay, and set for this set, the name that we have to use is app food. Okay, app food, and for this we get the directive which is food directive, and now I have this value as directive dot favorite food. So with this is how I can get hold of the favorite food from the directive, and now I can say empty, and here this dot food equal to directive food, whatever the favorite food that is here, the biryani. Okay, right now what we are doing, in the app component we are getting hold of the food directive, which is this directive, using ViewChild and getting hold of the food directive and its field. Okay, and we are using this one here. Let's display this in the parent component. Maybe we'll display under this. Okay, let's see whether it is rendered. Now if you see chicken biryani, this is rendered, but this value is not part of the directive. If you see, Let's expand the app route. Let's go to the Angular injection tree. So this is how you can check. Within the app component, we have a food directive. It is a child. Food directive is child of the app component. Okay, just to see the view this. And next thing is within the elements, chicken biryani is here. Okay. Okay. If you see this directive directive portion is only until here only this span tag, but the chicken biryani is outside this span tag. Okay, which is part of the parent component, but the actual value is coming from the directive app food. Okay, that's how we got hold of the directive field in the parent component using ViewChild. So now let's check how we can apply the ViewChild for a child component, actual component. So first, before we go for that, let's create a child component since we don't have any child components right now. So I'm using Angular schematics and I create a child component. Okay. I should be in the root project folder. So now that the child component is created, okay, now I can use that child, app child here. Okay, right now if you see child works, but there is nothing. Let me just push this content to again center, and I'll just keep this here. So now the content came into the middle. Now what I'll do is, how we can get hold of it right now. First we'll go to the child component, app child component. Okay, within this component, what we will do is we will add a couple of methods. Get welcome message, and within this we will return welcome back to from child component. Okay, right now this particular method is in child component. Okay, also we'll add one field name also. Okay, we'll say a name equal to Shiva. Okay, so now this particular field as well as the message method, these two are within the child component. Let's get hold of these two methods from the child and use it in the parent. Okay, so the parent, of course, it is app component, and if you want to see within the Angular tab, you see app root, app child. So this is the parent and this is the child, and even you can see the structure of the component right now. So within the app component, there is a child component. Okay, we are looking at this is part of the child component. This is child component is part of the app component. This is how it is represented. Okay, router outlet will be by default, it is part of any component. So it is child for any component. So the one that we created is child component. Okay, just for your understanding, I'm showing this. Okay, now, so since this is a child component, how we can get hold of the child component in the parent is, this is a parent using ViewChild. Within the ViewChild, directly we have to refer the child component and the type of the component is child component type. Okay. Okay. So by default, Angular configuration that we added, it will throw the error unless we use it, until we use it. So for that reason, I just added. Okay, now what we can do is, I'll add a button click. And within this, I'll call the child component dot name. So this is the name. This is how I can get hold of the child component name. What we have in the child component, it is Shiva. Okay, so that value we'll get, and here this dot name equal to this one. So this name we are getting it from the child. I'm just defining a name here, empty name, to get hold of the name value in the parent. Right now this name value is coming from the child, and at the same time what I'll do is I'll call the other method, welcome message method, from the child. So the name is coming from child, welcome message is coming from child. Here the welcome message, I'll assign it to message property, and now I can use this name and message in the parent, which is app component HTML. Now let me just print this instead of this name and the welcome message. What is it? It's a message. Okay, let's see. Name does not exist on child component. Okay, there is a name. Why does it not exist? Oh, okay, got it. Now I understood why it is not displayed in the parent. Why? Because I added it in the click event. I need to write a button to click that so that it will be visible. Okay, so now to see this content, let me just add a button. Just add this button within here and click to see child content, and for this particular function button I'll add a click event, and the event name should be this one. Sorry, not this one. Click event. Now, so when I click this button, it will get the content from the child and it display on the parent. Okay, now you see this particular message came from child but rendered onto the parent. Okay, let's see. If you see, this is app child. Okay, if I close this one, okay, this particular content that you are seeing, this is part of the parent, which is app route, and if you see, this is under the parent, not under the child. Okay, so under the child only this content is there, but this particular content that I am displaying, it is under the parent component, not on the child component, but the data came from the child component. So this is how we can share the data from the child component to the parent component using ViewChild. Got it? Let's just understand one more time. So this is the child component. There is a name Shiva and a message in the child component, and we are calling, and within the parent component, when I click the button, I'm getting hold of the child name as well as the function, because I'm able to get hold of the child using ViewChild. So because it is a type child component, that's why I'm using this type, and I get hold of the child component, and when I click the button on the UI, it is getting the name of the child component name field as well as the welcome message, and these two are part of the parent, and I'm using these two to display on the page. This is how the ViewChild works with the components. So these are the three different ways we can apply the ViewChild. First one is to a native HTML element. Second one is to directly apply for the child component. And third way is we can apply the ViewChild to a directive, and still we can get hold of the directive fields or methods in the parent component. Start with the ngIf. I'll first write the Angular 16 version, how we can write a ngIf condition, and then I'll write the same ngIf condition in Angular 17 version. Let me just start with the div. This is Angular 6 way of writing the ngIf condition. I'll say if toggle message is true, I'll say hello and welcome. If toggle message is false, I wanted to display goodbye. Okay, but this is not a message. For this we need a template, and here we will say goodbye. Okay, now that, so in this condition, if toggle message is true, it will display this particular value, and if toggle message is false, it will display goodbye, this particular message. Let me just add this in the TypeScript file. Okay, there is something wrong. Let's see. Goodbye does not exist on that. Okay. Now it is rendered. So let me just set this message properly. Let's set it. Let's just increase the font style to see it easily. And center. And we'll do the okay. Let's set this like ID. Now it will render. Let me just align this particular text also to see it properly. So now, if toggle message is true, it will display this particular message, and if toggle message is false, it will go to goodbye template and it will display goodbye. Okay. So this is how the if condition we used to write in previous Angular 16 version. If you see right now, this particular message is displayed, the toggle message, this message. Why? Because this toggle message is set to true. Now we'll change it to false, and the goodbye message should display. So now goodbye message displayed, right? So this is the Angular version 16 way to write the if condition. Now we'll go further. We'll convert the same thing to Angular 17 version. How? So basically, in Angular 17 project, older version of Angular, if condition still works, that's why it is properly rendering. Now let's convert this to Angular 17 version. The same toggle message, and if it is true or false, based on that, we'll simply cut this, paste it here. We'll say Angular 17 version and else message, else will display this particular, display this particular content. Okay. Now if you say goodbye, displayed from goodbye from 17. Both are same, but the way we are writing the if condition is different, and it is in Angular 17 it is easy to write and read. This particular Angular older version was a little bit clumsy, and we have to write else condition like this. Okay, now we'll change it to true to see the other content on the UI. So this is how it will render. Okay, so previously we used to write if like this, and now we are writing if like this. So that is the only difference. Okay. So now check how we write for loop. To iterate elements and display on the UI, we use for, and let's start with writing in Angular 16 version, then we'll write it in Angular 17. So let's just push it up. Okay, now in Angular 16 version, we used to say for let fruit of fruits, we'll add fruits on the other side. So now we need some list of values. Okay, let's just add only 2 fields right now, and to display it, This is how we display the value. Let's see. So now orange and banana displayed. Let me just set this also to be centered to view it. Orange and banana now you are seeing. Also let me just change font size to see it easily. Okay. Now you see orange and banana displayed. This is the version 16 way of implementing ng-for. Now we'll change the same thing to version 17. So it will be like it is much more easy with version 17. So ng-for the same thing, name of fruits, and we need to add a tag by name, and with this as usual simply we need to display the same thing. Okay. Oh sorry, tag by fruit. Okay. Now it will display. This is Angular 17 display. We'll just say 17. And if you want to center a line, again we need to use this div. Let's just use this div. Plain div we'll use just to align this content to center. Okay. Now these two values came from Angular 17 version. So this previously with version 16 we used to write ng-for, and this is a list, and we used to get each value out of it like this. With Angular version 17 we write the for loop like this, @for fruit of fruits, and we track this particular list by one of the value, which is fruit right now. It is, since it is not a object format, let's change this one to object and see. Instead of plain values, we'll change this to object, like 1, comma. So first value is orange. Sorry, we'll say ID as 1, name as fruit name like this. Let's add one more record. We'll say number 2, and it should be banana here. So let's see how we can set this. Now it won't work because it is object. Let's do this. Let's, in Angular 16 right now we have a fruit. This one has ID and name. So ID, and let's say what we used. It is name only. So let's say name. This is how we display. If you see, displayed, this is version 16, and when it comes to version 17, fruit.id, we track it by ID, and same thing we do in Angular 17. If you see, now this is the way to display in Angular 17. So overall, the display point of view, everything is same, just a minor change from ng-for to @for, and we give the same name, and it is very minimal change. It's not a completely big change when it comes to Angular 17 for ng-for loop. So now let's look at the switch statement. Okay, in Angular 16, the way we used to write the switch statement is ng switch. We use the same fruit example, and within this span of maybe what fruits we have here, orange and banana. Okay, orange, so the switch case, as you know, whatever the value that is passed, only one of these values are going to be printed, and in the final else statement, no fruit should have a else statement, but within this there is one more minor change. ng switch case equals to 1. Let's copy. This is 2. Let's check. Oh, okay, sorry, I just added this ng switch, and the fruit is passed. Okay, we need to pass this fruit value. So right now initially we'll pass fruit value as 1, and let's see which one is going to print it. Okay, fruit ng switch. Oh, okay, this is the problem. Okay, now it should work. If you see, orange, no fruit is available. No, this is not. Oh, okay, this should be the default value. ng switch default. So now orange is printed. Why it is printed? Because the switched fruit statement, fruit value is coming as 1. I will change it to 2. The next value is going to be displayed. Now if you see, banana is displayed, and for suppose if it's pass 3, okay, since there is no 1 or 2 or 3 is not going to match with these two, so this message is going to be printed. So no fruit is available. This is the Angular 16 way of writing ng switch statement. Now we will write the same switch statement in Angular 17 version. Okay, in Angular 17 directly we write switch and the same fruit value that we pass, and here within this each case will have case of 1, and if it is matching, the value will say span of orange, and this is one case, and second case, case 2. If case 2 is matching number 2, then we display banana here, and the final value, if nothing is matching, we will default the value to no fruit is available. Okay, now we'll say this is version 17 just for our understanding when we see it on the UI. 17. See, so now no fruit is available. This value came from 17 because the fruit value that you are passing is 3 and it won't match with 1 or 2. Now let's change it to 2. Okay, now it is changed to 2. That means this value should be displayed and even banana should be displayed. So this value came from Angular version 16 code and this one came from Angular 17 version code. So before we look into the differ feature, let's first understand the lazy loading. So lazy loading is the process of loading resources on demand instead of loading on the initial page load. Instead of loading all the UI upfront when the page initially loads, lazy loading defers the loading of unnecessary content until the user interacts with the page. Lazy loading reduces the initial page load time and ensures that users can start interacting with the application as soon as possible, while non-essential parts of the application load in the background. It will reduce the required bandwidth and the server load. So basically Angular 17 introduced the next level of lazy loading feature using defer control block, and lazy loading also applies to the dependencies of the content of the block, which is including the component or a directive or a pipe. Anything can be lazily loaded too. So there are different ways to defer in Angular with the version 17. One is on interaction, the first one. So let's understand how this defer works on interaction. So right now I just created a basic project where there is nothing other than this heading. So let me just start with writing the code on how we can differ on interaction. So I'll take a div. I'll just push this content to the center for our better visibility. I'll just add what we are testing. So differ on interaction. We wanted to validate. We wanted to test right now. So differ goes like this, @differ, and the first one that we wanted to test is differ on interaction. It will be small letter. So we'll understand what is on interaction. Okay. Otherwise, there will be a placeholder where we can say the content. So let's understand what it is. So basically what we are saying, the differ on interaction is the way it works, since this is one of the lazy loaded feature. So when the user click or interact with this particular content on the page, that's when this content is going to be displayed and this will be hidden. That means until the user click this particular content or interact with this content is not going to be displayed. So that means it is completely hidden, not even rendered onto the web browser. Let's check how this works. So right now you're seeing click to see the deferred content. That is the content that is displayed on the page load. So let's check how this content is right now. Let's go to the body. So now if you see, click to see the deferred content is the only piece that is rendered onto the browser DOM, but this content is not displayed, not even rendered onto the browser DOM. Once I click this content will be enabled. Now let's check. I'm clicking it. So when I click this one, if you see, this content interacted, so displaying this message. So the message is changed and the other content is removed from the DOM. This content is removed from the DOM. So that means on interaction works only when we interact with that particular content. That's when it will be displayed. Okay, this is how the on interaction differ works. So since we looked at on interaction differ, now let's look at on hover differ, how it works. It will, I'll just change the title. So on hover, so the same content and not interacted, it will be hovered. So hovering meaning just touching it instead of clicking it. So now let's check on this particular page. If you see the content under the body, if you see, click to see the deferred content, not even clicked right now. Hover to see the deferred content. Hover meaning just moving the browser cursor onto the text. Okay, now let's expand this and see. So right now, hover to see the default content is visible. Now I'm just hovering the keyboard, I'm just hovering the mouse cursor. If you see, the content is changed. I did not even click, I just hovered on top of that message. Now the content is changed. So hover, so the displaying this message. So deferred on hover, as soon as without even clicking, just hover onto that content, it will be displayed. And the other content is removed from the browser DOM. Okay, this is how the defer on hover works. So the third way of deferring is on idle. So let's write defer on idle. This is the title that I'm just changing. So basically it will be idle, defer on idle. Idle meaning, so when the browser is completely display the complete page content and everything is settled on idle, that's when this content is going to be displayed. Okay. So this for this particular idle, we no need to interact or hover or do anything. automatically Angular, when this whole page is rendered onto the browser, when the page is stable and idle, that's when it will automatically display. You cannot directly see it on the browser if you see. So by directly you are seeing this content because there is nothing on this page to display. If there is large content that we are displaying and after that the page will be idle, then that's when the message is going to be displayed. But currently, since we don't have too much content on this particular page, so by default you are able to see that content because this is idle already. So the next type of defer is on timer. So let me just change it. So basically on timer works. The deferred content will be timely displayed. Like for suppose if I want to display this the content after 5 seconds or after 10 seconds, it will be displayed accordingly based on the timing. Let's just change the this one to on timer. So it will be the timer, and this timer will expect the parameter like 5 seconds or 50 seconds or the time. And so basically okay, 50 seconds finished. So displaying the content. Waiting on 50 seconds to finish. So the way it works is, right now if you go to the screen, so waiting on 50 seconds to finish, after 50 seconds automatically it will display the other message. Let's see. I think 50 seconds is too much. Let me just reduce it to 30 seconds or maybe 15 seconds because it's taking time. Let's say 15 seconds, okay, so that it will render faster. So waiting for 15 seconds to finish so that the deferred content is going to be displayed on the page. Yeah, now let's test one more time. So now it is waiting 15 seconds, and if you see, waiting for 15 seconds to finish, which is on the browser DOM. Let's see how this is going to change after 15 seconds. So now the 15 seconds finished. That's why this particular content is displayed, and the other content waiting for 15 seconds is completely removed from the DOM. So this is how it works. Since it is removed, the performance of the application is going to be much faster compared with keeping the content in the browser and hiding it from the screen. So the next type of defer is defer on viewport. That means when the user navigate or scroll down to that particular place of the content, that's when it will be deferred and displayed. Let's see how we can do that. So now I'll say defer on viewport. Viewport is the screen. Viewport meaning this whole screen is viewport. Okay. Now I'll just change this to viewport. Defer on viewport. Defer on viewport, and viewport reached. So the displaying the content. Waiting for user to scroll to the viewport to see the message. Okay. So now what we'll do is, so we have these two. Right now directly it is displaying viewport reached, so the displaying the message. Now since this is within the same screen, right away it is interacted. Now I'll push this to the below this particular content viewable viewport so that we can test this properly. What I'll do is I'll add height of 700 pixel to this content. So now you are not able to see that particular content, viewport content. Let's see. So now if you see, waiting for user to scroll to the viewport. Okay. Now since this scroll bar, when I scroll this one to that particular place, automatically it will come under the viewport and it will change the value and display the other value. Let's see. I'm scrolling it. See, now I scrolled to this particular content, suddenly viewport reached, so displaying this message. Okay, let me just check one more time, show it one more time. Okay, now right now if you see the deferred content for the viewport, it is still waiting. So since it is not visible right now on the viewport, on viewport meaning the browser web page. Now I'm scrolling down to that viewport. Yeah, now I scroll down to see this content. Right away it is displayed. That this is how the viewport works. So if you want to hide something, for suppose if you have a big long page where you have showing lot of content, and you wanted a user to scroll down, that's when you wanted to load the page so that the page performance of the page is going to be much better and display the content whatever is needed in this viewport right now. And after that, when the user scroll it, that's when you can load and defer the leftover content so that it will improve the performance of the web page. Discuss the Angular routing. So basically Angular has inbuilt a routing feature. Since Angular is the framework, it is coming up with the inbuilt routing feature. And Angular routing helps the user to navigate from one page to another page. Since this is a single page application, we are not actually completely routing from one page to another application. Instead, we are replacing the content of the main page, which is app component.html, and based on the user navigation, we replace the content within the body of the HTML section with the routed page content. So this is how the Angular routing works. Now let's look at the real-time code and understand this better. Let's look at the Angular routing. So before we actually write the code to understand the Angular routing, there are a few things that we need to discuss. So when we actually create the Angular application, so there will be a file called app.routing.module.ts. This is one of the major file for Angular routing, and this is where we are going to provide all the routes to a different component within the Angular application. And to use the Angular routing feature in the app.module.ts file, we need to make the entry of Angular router module. So by default, when you create the application, this module is not going to be imported, and we need to make the entry of router module and import the router module here. Then only the Angular routing is going to work. So let's start with code. So right now, since I already started the application, there is nothing right now. So let's start by adding few routes to this and understand. So I'm adding 2 navigation bars on the top. So if you see, there is a dashboard and profile. Okay, now this is one way to set the routing using router link in the HTML itself. And this is the route. What I'm saying, when I click the dashboard, navigate to this particular dashboard route. And I'm setting one more route here, profile. But right now there is nothing, so these routes are not created. That's why nothing is happening. And what we will do is we will create 2 components. ng generate component dashboard. I'm using Angular schematics to generate the component, and FC dashboard component is created. And along with this, I'm creating a profile component, and now I got profile component as well. Okay, now let me write the routing. So right now, since we have components, profile and dashboard, still it won't work because we need to write that routing logic. So right now, dashboard and profile. So the important file that I talked about is app routing. Within this routing file, we need to make the entry for the route. Okay, so it will be the path. So the path should be the actual URL, and this particular path will be replaced in after this application context. Okay, once we click it, and within this, when we click that particular route, what component it should display. Okay, right now I'm setting it as dashboard component, and there is one more route which is profile. For that, again, let's say profile and profile component. Now you see we have 2 routes. Now let's click and see. If you see dashboard works. This is the dashboard content, and when I click profile works, and you see the profile content, the content. Right now we haven't navigated from one page to another page. Instead, every time when we click a route, so basically, since this is a single page application, so every time when you click a route, this is the app route. Okay, and if you see, go to the Angular tab, and if you see the injection tree, and you click dashboard, and now if see here, within the app component, there is a router outlet and dashboard component. So through the routing, dashboard component is rendered onto app component. Okay. Now let me click profile. Okay. Now we are in profile. Now if you go and see app component, within the app component, profile component rendered onto app component as a child component and through the router outlet. Okay. So the router outlet loaded this profile component into app component. This is how you should understand. Now that's how it is working. Now, so since this profile and dashboard both are referred in this particular routing class, for that reason it is working. Okay. Now let's see how we can call this same routing not directly from this particular HTML. Instead, how we can do it from the TypeScript, because we will have situations where we need to route based on the scenario. Like if there is some logic performed and based on the outcome of that particular logic, we may need to route to a different page. Depends upon the response, depending upon the response. So for that type of scenario, we need to route to a different component from the TypeScript file. So now let's see how we can perform this routing from the TypeScript file. So right now I'll just add a button, route to dashboard. I'll say button name, and click event, route to dashboard. Okay, now if you see the button, okay, I need this function, then it will load the page. Okay, now as of now, if you see, there is a button. Okay, so there is a button. Let me just push this button to center. I'm just formatting it. Okay, now this is the button. Okay, when I click this button, I wanted to navigate to dashboard screen instead of directly clicking this route. Okay, I wanted to click the button and navigate to the dashboard screen. For that, what I need to do is within the route to dashboard function, and to use this, I need a constructor with a router. So this is the router module. So I'm using this router module and this dot router dot. So there are two methods. One is navigate, another one is navigate URL. Right now let's look at navigate. Here what I'll say is, I'll say profile. Oh sorry, it's a dashboard. Okay. Okay, and now I'm routing it to dashboard. From here I'll add one more function which will route to profile as well. So let me add one more button. Route to profile. Okay. Now if you check here, when I click this, see when I click route to dashboard, it is routed to the dashboard from the TypeScript file, from this particular function. Okay. Now let's click route to profile. Again, profile, it is navigated to profile, not from the direct link from HTML, instead from the button. But when I click the button, it is clicking this routing through the via router. Okay. And right now, how we can pass the parameters. Okay. For suppose if there is something like this. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Now let's check from here. For suppose if I want to pass a parameter. Okay. In the app routing, should refer like this. Okay, now since it has ID, when I click it, it won't navigate to that. See, now it is not working because there is no matching matching URL. Now when I click from the top, it will go because there is a matched routing like with a dashboard and an ID. Okay, so now I added ID here. This is how we can pass the path parameter. Instead, from the button, from the button click, if I want to navigate, I can say like this, and it will navigate. Now let's click this button. Let's go to the home folder. Now I'm clicking the button. Now it is navigating because there is a path parameter that I added. This is how we can add the path parameter. Okay, and there is one more way to use the same routing, like navigate to URL. Let's use that method also. This is one more way to navigate, and within this you can simply say dashboard by 1. Okay, now attached to dashboard function, function, and we need to click that dashboard button. So now if you see navigate by URL also work the same way. See, it is routed. So you can either use this one or this one, there is no issue. But now when I navigate to the dashboard, I wanted to get hold of this parameter and perform something on the page, dashboard page. So how I can do that now? So once we go to navigate dashboard class, to get hold of the path parameter, that is to get hold of the path parameter in this URL. Okay, the way we can do it is, let's add the constructor. Okay, within the constructor we need to get hold of the activated route. Okay, so activated route. Okay, this activated route will have the current activated route parameters along with the URL. Okay, so when I navigate to dashboard screen, in this particular dashboard screen, I wanted to get hold of this URL and a parameter. For that, I need to use activated route. This activated route will get the actual URL and the parameters. Okay, so now what I'll do is this dot route dot parameters. It will get hold of the parameters, and we need to subscribe to get hold of the parameters and use those values. Okay, within this I'll say parameter equal to params of 0. Since there is only one parameter, it will be in an array format. If there are multiple parameters, it will have. So now if you see, I can take this parameter and print the parameter in the dashboard. Let's see. Okay, now it is empty. Let's see. Now when I click dashboard, okay, it didn't get the parameter. Okay, let's debug. Now you can go to source to nav and go to dashboard TS. Put a breakpoint here. Okay, click the button. I'm already here. Okay, click the button. Now if you see parameters ID, I need to get hold of based on the ID. It is not in the array format, it is in the object format. Okay, that is a problem. Okay, params.id, so that I can get hold of the value. Let's see. Params.id. Now I'll get the params of ID, it is saying. Okay, let's see how that is coming. Yeah, now if you see the parameter 1, we got the parameter 1 now. See, so now let's change that parameter to maybe 25. Okay, let's go back, click this, and if you see the parameter 25 got. So this is how we can get hold of the parameters. Okay, well, let's look at a few minor things before we wrap up this session. So along with this, there is something called, we can even say, empty file route directly to the profile component using redirect to profile, and let's add profile component URL. So what we are saying, if there is just a default path match, instead of loading this, directly redirect to profile route, so profile route, and display the profile component. Okay, so this is the initial direct route. So let's see, when we go and hit this URL, it will directly go to the profile. Okay, that's something wrong. Let's see. Oh, okay, so along with this, we have to say path match value, and it will say full. So that means exact full path. If it is matching, that's when it will be loaded to the profile screen. See now, if I remove this, and this is the default URL, when I hit it, it is directly going to the profile, because we are redirecting this URL to profile. That's why directly it is loading the profile. So along with this, there are some more things called children. So this children, when we hit this particular API URL, that's when it will load the children components or children directives. Okay, but right now, since Angular 17 came up with the deferrable views feature, and we no need to do the lazy loading from here. Instead, we can use the deferrable feature and directly use the lazy loading directly in the component itself. No need to implement the lazy loading from the routing. Let's look at how we can apply the CSS for an Angular project. There are three different ways to apply CSS, and first one is through the global CSS class, where style.css or CSS file, and the second one is at the component level, where we'll have a component name.css file or a CSS, or there is another way which is inline process, and where we can add the CSS inline in the HTML file itself. Basically, this is not recommended. Now let's look at one by one with the exact CSS samples in the real-time application point of view. So now let's look at how we can apply the CSS globally. So when we create an Angular project, there will be a file called styles.css. This is a major global CSS file. For suppose right now, I just created a blank application where there is nothing. So let me just add a button for this. Okay. So this is the button. Now let's look at how we can apply global CSS for this. So the global CSS file for Angular is styles.css. Okay. So here in this, we can say background color green, and font text color white. Okay. Let's see now. If you see, this is a button. The background color, let's just push this to center. Okay. So let's push this button to center. Now it is a little bit off. Okay. So now this is a container. When you go to the global CSS class, so I'm using a flexbox, line items center, and let's justify the content to center so that it will push the button to center. So now we have a button, click me in the center, and we have a background color and the text color, and let's give some height and width as well at this button. It is too much for a button. Okay. 5 and 150. So this is a button right now. Okay. Let's add a border radius of 25 pixel. So this is a button right now. Okay. So this particular CSS, the button is in the app component. Okay. And we added CSS in styles.css. Okay. This is a global file. And if you add like this, and if you add one more component or one more button within here, it will apply to all these buttons across the application, same CSS. Okay. And if you just get rid of this CSS, okay, and let's add one more component. I'm using Angular schematics. I'll say second component. What I'll do is, this is the app component. I'll add app second component here. Okay, and I'll add the same buttons in the second component. Okay, let me add a h1 with the title. So these are two different components right now. So these two buttons are from the app component and these two buttons are from the second component. Okay, if you look at the Angular injection tree, now if you see, there is an app component, and within the app component there is a second component. Okay, so within the app component, second component is there. Okay, but the CSS, if you see, same CSS is applied for all the buttons. Okay, let me just remove this one. Okay, so the same. Okay, let me add one more thing just for clarity. Okay, so if you apply or if you add a CSS in the global style class, which is style.css, whatever the CSS that you add within this, it will apply to the entire application regardless of the component. Okay, it is not specific to a component, it is it will apply across the application. Okay, so now let's move these styles. We can keep the container like this, but cut this button and let's go to app component CSS and second component CSS. Okay, let's override this. Let's add button here and here as well. Now in the app component CSS, I'll say I want yellowish button, and in the second component I want pink button. Okay, let's see. If you see, now main component has yellow and second component has pink. Okay, if you want to maintain the consistent styles across the application, this type of buttons or text color or text style and all these things, we have to keep it in the style.css so that it will apply to the entire application. Okay, if there are any customized styles specific to a component, keep those CSS classes within its specific component CSS class. Okay, so there is one more way to add CSS. Okay, for in the app component.html file, we have a button here, and its CSS class is this, and it has a background color of yellow. Okay, and now what I'll do is I'll add a inline style. This is one more style. So the third type of style is inline styles, where we can add a style background color. I'm adding red color here. Okay, if you see, red color is replaced. Okay, and I already have a yellow color here. So if you notice, the inline style took the precedence over component style. Okay, this is the inline style where I added the inline background color, and for the same button we already have a pink color. Okay, sorry, not the pink, where is the, yeah, I added here background color of yellow. But if you notice, this particular background color that is added in the inline style overridden the component style. Okay, so every time when you add inline style, that will take the precedence over component style. Okay, and component style will take the precedence over the global styles. Precedence meaning significance or importance. Okay, but these inline styles are not recommended. This is not a proper coding structure, so we have to always either write a class here. Okay, and you create a style sheet, create the style within the component like this. Okay, this is a better way instead of writing the inline CSS here. Okay, always avoid inline styles, that is not recommended. Okay, So now that we looked at global styles using style.css, the second one is component level style, okay, where we'll have a individual CSS file for a specific component, and this is how we can add, and this is specific to a component. And inline style will be applied only at the specific component, specific element level. Okay, this will be applied only to this button within this component, and it's not going to apply for any other thing. So this is inline style, and better not to you write inline styles. Okay, so there are other ways also to use the CSS. We can, if you don't want to write your own custom CSS, okay, for suppose this button styles, just remove it. Okay, and global style, we have a container here, even this also. If you don't want to use it for now, just let it be. Okay, if you want to use any third-party library like Bootstrap, okay, how we can use it, I'll show you. Now this is how you can add the Bootstrap to your project, Angular project. Let's run it. Okay, so not only the Bootstrap, there are different other third-party CSS libraries that we can use. Okay, Bootstrap was developed by Twitter, and it follows most of the styles from Twitter. Twitter is current X application. Okay, now Bootstrap CSS is applied to our application. If you notice what exactly it updated, first one is package.json. It made an entry into package.json. Okay, if you see, this is the Bootstrap. It made an entry here. Angular.json. Okay, within this, if you scroll down, okay, right now, since I added Bootstrap, it made an entry here for its Bootstrap CSS to use when we start the application or when we run the application, when I build the application. Get rid of inline styles and component level styles and see how this is going to behave. So now, since I'm using Bootstrap, we can directly use these classes, and these are the classes that we have not created, but it will be applied automatically because of the Bootstrap. So since we added Bootstrap, now let's replace this button and add Bootstrap CSS like this. Okay, this is a class that I have not added, but this is directly used from Bootstrap CSS. Let's see how this is going to render. See, now the button is changed automatically. I didn't apply any CSS class. I didn't apply any CSS for this, and I didn't write this CSS at all. But this is coming from the Bootstrap. Since I added Bootstrap, so we can directly use its features and the CSS without even writing our own CSS. If you see, even the header also changed. The styling for this navigation content US Learning Hub, this particular style also changed. So this is how you can apply CSS to Angular application. Let's look at different type of Angular directives. So there are three possible directives in Angular. So the first one is a component based directive. So component itself is a special directive in Angular. It will have a template or template URL which will manipulate the DOM on the browser. So for that reason, this is one of the specialized directive in Angular. The second directive is structural directive. So basically, this will also manipulate the DOM, but it is not at a total the component itself. It is at the specific piece of the component, like iterating a specific list of elements or updating some of the values in the specific form or something like that. And these structural directive examples are ng if, or Angular 17 version, it is @if, or ng for, or Angular 17 version of @for. So which will add certain things to the DOM and which will remove certain things from the DOM within the component. So this is one type of a special directive which is called as structural directive. So the third type of directive is attribute level directive. It's attribute directive. So the component directive is at the complete component level, which is almost at the piece of the page, and structural directive is at the specific portion of the component which will manipulate, and attribute directive is going to be applied at the specific HTML element level, and it will change the appearance or behavior of an HTML element. And for example, ng style or ng class, which will apply to a specific HTML element. So now let's understand component level directive. Okay, so right now I just have a plain application. Other than the title, there is nothing. Okay, so to understand component level directive, let's create component child. Okay, within the component, let's go and see what we have in the component. Okay, so at the component, and there is a selector and the template. So a directive is something which will update or manipulate or add some additional feature to the existing HTML element. Okay, so right now so we have child works here. Okay, now let's include this component app child in the parent component. Now if you see, there is a child component, okay, which is manipulating the current DOM. Okay, this is rendered onto the browser DOM. This is browser DOM, right? So it is rendered onto the browser DOM. That means it is a specialized directive which is manipulating the DOM. Okay, so in this the current browser DOM, so child component came and it rendered this particular string. Okay, this is one of the type of directive. A directive which is component which will have a template, and it will be rendered onto the browser. So since it is rendered onto the browser, it is manipulating the DOM. Okay, so the second type of directive is at the structural directive. Okay, let's understand what is structural directive with an example. Okay, right now I'm adding states list. Okay, Texas, California, okay, I added 4 states. Instead of this, let's change it to a object instead of plain array. So let's change it to ID, which is 1, name, which is Texas, three, 4, put it here, here, and Jersey, let me add here. So I have 4 records with the states. Now let's add for loop for this, which is Angular 17 type of for loop. State of states list, track by state.id. So I think track, we don't need track by. Okay, else just say no states found. Sorry, not else, it should be empty. Okay, and within this, what we will do is we'll just print state.id state dot name. Is it a name? Yeah, state dot name. Okay, now let's see. So right now this particular content, okay, let me just push it to center. I just wanted to push this to center. Let me just add 2, 3, 4. So now these 4 are rendered onto the UI, onto the DOM, and it is manipulating. Okay, this is the structural directive which will manipulate the DOM or updating the DOM or removing the DOM. In this case, we are adding these records to the DOM using ngFor, which is of structural directive. Which this is special type of directive. It is iterating and updating the records to the DOM. That means it is manipulating the DOM, and it is one more type of directive which is of structural. Okay. So now let's look at attribute level directive. Okay, let me just remove this, and we'll add a span tag. Okay, I'll say okay. So right now let me add a attribute directive, ng generate directive. I'll say movie. Okay, now let's go to movie directive, app movie. Let me just append here, and within the movie directive, it will basically get hold of the actual element, and it should be element reference. So this element, wherever we use this particular directive, it will get that current HTML element. Okay, since I used it here, it will get hold of this particular span tag. Okay, into when the application runs, when this particular span tag is rendering onto the browser DOM, it will look for this directive and it will go to this. Okay, before even rendering this whole string, this whole span tag, because of this it will first go to the directive. Okay, and whatever is implemented in this, it will take that complete content, then it will render onto the browser. Okay, now what we will do is, here I'll just append some text here using the renderer. Without having a renderer, you cannot create a text or append something, okay, to the browser DOM. What I'll do is, Bahubali is my favorite movie. I wanted to set that. So using the renderer, I'll append a child to, I'll append this particular child to this element with this text. Okay, what it does is, it will take this particular element and it will append this particular string and it will display. Okay, let's try to understand. When we actually load this page HTML template to the browser DOM, if there is nothing like, if we don't have this app movie, it will automatically render without any headache. Since this particular directive is there, before even rendering this span tag, it will go to its directive constructor. Okay, it will go based on this name. See, this name should match, and constructor is always called when we actually create that specific directive. Okay, it will get hold of that specific element, which is span element. Okay, and renderer is a specific Angular feature which will get hold of the DOM and manipulate or update or remove things. Okay, for that reason we created a specific text using the renderer, and using that renderer we are appending this text to this element. So along with this, we have to set it to the native element. Okay, so now if you see, Bahubali is my favorite movie. So now this particular Bahubali string appended to this particular text as a, and it is one of the third directive, which is attribute level directive. Understand the component lifecycle in detail. So the first lifecycle method is constructor, and it is invoked during the component or directive creation. And the second one is ng on changes. It is invoked every time when there is a change occurs to the one of the input properties of the component. So the next one is ng on init. It is invoked when the component has been initialized, and it is called only once after the ng on changes, and it is called only once per component creation. So the next one is ng do check. It is invoked when the change detector detects a change in the input properties, and we can add our custom checks as well. And we cannot have ng do check and ng on changes in the same component, because both serve the same purpose. So the next one is ng on destroy. Basically, it is called when the component or directive is destroyed from the DOM. So now let's understand each and every lifecycle method in detail with a real-time example to get the good clarity on all these lifecycle methods and when to use them appropriately. So now let's write the real-time code to understand the constructor and ng on init together. Let me start by adding some code changes so it will be easy to understand. Let me just start with a div. Type text, I need a text box. This is Angular directive. Currently there is nothing in this application, it is plain text box. Okay. And let me just add a button. So let's start with adding a constructor. Let's add a console.log from constructor, and let's implement on init. Okay, within this again we'll add a console.log. We'll say from on init. So as a first step, let's look at it. If you see from constructor, from on init. So first one constructor is called, then on init is called, but this doesn't make sense. So let's understand with a real-time example, like when we are going to use constructor and on init, and what kind of a logic that we are going to add as part of the constructor and on init. So for that I'm writing this code. Okay, let's add a button and click event get product details by ID. It is a function, and I'm going to pass this product ID. Since it is annotated with ng model, it will automatically tied up to this particular property, and it will have the value associated. Okay, let me just paste it here. Okay. Let's see. It is a string. Let's see how it is looking. Let's see how this is looking on the UI. Okay, we have a text box and a product button. Let me just align them to look better. Let me set the same thing here also. styles. We have styles already. Okay, now it is centered. Okay, now let's add another component. So I'm giving a real-time example when we use. So for that reason, I'm writing this code. Let's create a shared component. I'll just go to the router, add a path to child, the product ID, and component would be I want to create a new component. ng generate component product. So now we have a product class and a product component. I'll go to the routing. I'll add a routing path product. I'll pass the product ID. Component name is product component. Okay, we have a route to product component right now. What I'll do is when I click this button, I want to need router module. This router navigate to product page, and I'm passing this product ID. Okay, product URL, product ID I'm passing. Now it will match the routing, this one, and when we go to this particular component, now let's focus. This is where now you can see the real-time scenario, what we usually do in the constructor in real time. Okay, within the constructor, see right now we have a product. We are calling this particular product URL, and we are passing the product ID. Okay, if you could look at the URL, product and product ID. Now I want to get hold of this product ID and make the API call to get the product details. For that scenario, now I need to get hold of the activated route. Okay, once I get the activated route, to get hold of the route URL, okay, what I need to do is I need to call this dot route. Let's say route. It's not a router. Route dot so parameters dot subscribe, so that I can get the parameters, and once I get the parameters, I'll just add a product ID as empty, and now this dot product ID equal to params of product ID, so that I can get hold of the product ID. Okay, so in this type of scenario, to get hold of the parameter in the browser, okay, now let's look at when I click this one, I have a number one, right? To get hold of this one in the product component, I'm writing the logic in the constructor, because I need this. As soon as I go to this particular component, I need this right away. Why I need this is because After this, what I'll do is, now let's look at the ng on init and why I need that. Okay, now implements on init. Now ng on init. Within this ng on init, okay, before we go there, okay, let me just create a service called product. Okay, now what I'll do is I'll go to product service. Within this product service, I need HTTP client. Okay, I'll add a method get product details, and I will get the product ID as a string parameter, and I will return this dot HTTP dot get of plus product ID. So I'm using a dummy JSON website to get the data. So I'm using this dummy API. Okay, I'll pass the product ID and get the data. Okay, now I have a service method within the product. What I'll do is, along with this, I'll inject product service I got. Now what I'll do is this dot product service dot get details of this dot product ID, because this product ID, whatever is assigned to this, it will come here. Dot subscribe. When I subscribe, I get the data. Once I get the data, I'll use that data and assign it to some local variable, which is, I'll call it as a product details. Okay, product details of any. Okay, now here this dot product details equals to I'll get data. So product details will have data. Okay, and if you understand this, within this page, I want to first get hold of the parameter value. Okay, then I need to make for that I used constructor to get hold of the parameter value. Okay, once I got the parameter, now in the ng on init, I'm making the API call to get the product data. Once I get the product details, I wanted to display these details in the product HTML. Okay, in product HTML, let's add a div and we'll align it to center. Div styles. Let me just copy the same div styles from here to products CSS. Okay, so that it will center line. Now I have this. Okay, what I'll do is I'll use Angular 17 version of if okay, I'll say toggle product details, else no product details available to view. Okay, initially on the page load, I'll set this as false until we make the API call and get the details. Okay, here we already got the data, so now I'll set this as true once I have the data ready, so that it will enable that to display. Okay, now within here, since I have if I have product details, that's when I wanted to display the data. Okay, so object is empty. Okay, now I have product. Okay, now I'll display the product details. Okay, product ID, product details dot ID, and product title, product details dot title, this is small title, and product price. I'm getting these fields based on the dummy JSON API. If you see the price, description, and title, based on that I'm writing the code. So this is price. We are getting 3 values out of it. Now let's remove this product box. Now let's test this. So this is the main page. Okay, I need to. Okay. Now when I search for one, now I got the product details. How this is working? Okay, in the product component, I'm using this getting hold of this parameter. Okay, how I'm getting hold of that parameter? Within this constructor of the product component, I'm getting hold of the route, current activated route. Okay, which is this current activated route is this. Okay, from this route I'm getting the parameters. From this activated route there is only one parameter. How this is recognizing this as a parameter is because I added like this. So this is the parameter. Okay, and from that parameter, so I'm getting hold of the parameter based on the product parameter name. If you see, this is a parameter name, it should match, otherwise it won't get hold of it. I'm assigning it to a product ID. Now that I have product ID, okay, so anything that you are going to add within this particular place, within the constructor, that should not display anything in the view, which is HTML. Okay, you can add anything that is not used to display in the UI when the component is created, because if you want to display something on the UI, okay, currently product details we are displaying, right? If you see product details, we are displaying product details. Okay, if there is anything that you want to display on the page, okay, that shouldn't be part of the constructor, because when we call the constructor, the product component itself is creating, so it is not completely created. So if the product component itself is creating, that time you cannot pass any data to the UI HTML file. Okay, it won't work. For that reason, this product ID, I'm not passing it to the UI, I'm just getting hold of the parameter. That's all. I'm not displaying anything. So for that reason, I kept this logic in the constructor. Now that you should put the logic that won't display anything in the HTML, okay, and just perform some logic and get hold of some data and keep it in the TypeScript itself. That type of logic you should put within the constructor. Once the constructor is done, okay, my component is created. Okay, because of that reason, on in it, now I am calling the API call, okay, and getting the data, because this data is displayed on the page. Okay, so when the component itself is not created, you cannot set this type of view related content in the constructor. Okay, and anything that you want to display, it shouldn't be part of the constructor, it should be on in it, on in it, not inside constructor. This is the major difference. In real-time project, this is how we use constructor versus ng on in it. The next lifecycle method is ng on changes. So let's write the code and understand ng on changes. So for that, I need a child component. So ng generate component child. I'm creating a child component, and I'll try to render this child component here. Okay, child works. I just wanted to align this content. Now the content is center aligned. Okay, let's pass a value, number. So let's pass this number to the child. So let's add this number field. So we'll say number equal to initial value as 0, and every time when I click a button, I'll add a number to it. So I'll say add method, and within this dot number equal to this dot number plus 1. Okay, but one thing here is okay, number. Okay, I need to pass this number to, I'm passing this to child. Okay, now I need to get hold of the number in the child component. So for this, we need to use @input of number. Initialize to 0. Okay, every time when I click this add function, okay, what I'm doing, I'm incrementing this number. So when I increment this number, automatically this number value is going to be changed in the child component. It will get this number, and in the child component, let's print this value. Incremented number is, we are printing. Okay, now every time when I click this, the number is going to change. Okay, now let's see ng on changes. So to check ng on changes in the child component, I need to add ng on changes, and it will get a simple change as a parameter. Okay, it will track every change in the child. Okay, what we will do is, whatever the change that is coming, we'll just log it as a table to the console. Okay, since we are changing this number is changing, and it will show the older number, current number in here. Okay, let's see. Now it is 0. When I click it, if you see, this is the change, current value, previous value, first change. This is not the first change, because first time when we loaded the page, that was the first change. Let's see. So this is going to be the first change. Okay, so when there is no, if it is the first change, there will be no previous value, and if it is second change, there will be a previous value. Okay, so the previous value, current value, and first change is false. So this is how the ng on changes works. But in real-time scenario, so in the real-time scenario, there will be certain situations where we need to perform and some logic to make API call and get the data from backend and display based on the selection on the child. Okay, it depends. So for that type of scenario, we have to use ng on changes and tag that specific change and write that particular logic in the ng on changes. Okay. Okay. Now let's see how we can write ng destroy. So ng destroy. Okay. Okay, this is called when the child is destroyed. Okay. Right now it is displayed in the parent component here. When I destroy this one, the destroy function is going to be called. Let's see how we can destroy is I'll add a if condition and I'll toggle the child. Okay. Hide and seek. Okay. At the rate, this is Angular 17 way of writing if child is hidden or destroyed. Okay. So now I'll say initially this is true, that I'll add one more function to destroy the child. Okay. Destroy child. So in this destroy function, I'll destroy the child. To destroy the child, all I need to set is false, so that it will be hidden from the, not hidden, it will be removed from the DOM. Okay. Now let's see. I'm clicking destroy child. Oh, actually it is ng on destroy. That is a problem. Okay. Now when I click it, okay, if you see child is destroyed, the child is hidden from the app component. And if you see here, within the body, there is an app and there is no child at all. Okay. Understand what is Angular form and all the possible ways to create the form in Angular. Forms are most vital part of any web application. Every person uses forms on a daily basis. For example, ordering an item from Amazon or booking the movie tickets and so on. There are few important things to follow when developing the form. So there are two aspects. First one is user aspect. So user aspect meaning user should be able to easily use the form without any confusion. The form should be efficient and render and load faster on the web page, so that the user no need to wait longer time to use the form. So this is the user aspect, and there is a developer aspect. So on the developer aspect, being a developer, you should focus on proper validations and tracking the form changes, error messages, and proper form submissions. Before learning about Angular forms, it is better to learn the Angular data binding to understand forms better, because it is a prerequisite for Angular forms. And please watch my previous Angular videos to get knowledge on Angular data binding. So let's look at the real-time scenario to better understand forms. Nowadays, everybody have Gmail accounts, and when you actually navigate to the Gmail login page, where you see the text box for username and text box for password. So that is basically a form. So user is to go into enter the username and password in two text boxes. So once the user type the username and password, both the values should be bound to the TypeScript fields using data binding. And we need a service that takes the username and password and sends them to the backend server, like a Spring Boot application or AWS Lambda. And once the request reaches the server is going to check the username and password combination in the database to confirm the login, so that the user can navigate to the Gmail main screen and can see the emails. So basically, to perform this in Angular, Angular supporting two different type of forms, and there are pros and cons to both of these approaches. And now let's understand what is a template driven form or template based forms. So template driven forms looks almost similar to regular HTML forms, and follows the same approach as Angular version 1 for structure. It is majorly dependent on Angular core feature, which is two-way data binding, and uses the Angular ng model directive. So if you want to understand the template driven form, better to have knowledge on ng model attribute, and which is one of the directive. So since it is tied up with a ng model, automatically changes will be tracked and can be validated instantly. It requires a heavy HTML code and less component sized code. since it is more dependent on HTML, for a complex and large forms, it's going to be difficult to read and understand, and future maintenance is going to be tough for complex forms. So when to use this template based forms? So it is easy to use form and can be used only for basic use cases like a login page where the user need to enter a username and password. So now let's create an Angular 17 project and write the template based form and understand with the real-time project example. So to start with, I'll just start to write the basic HTML form, then we will add the Angular features to it. So to start a form, we need a form, and we need a input type text. We'll use this for username. We'll add a placeholder. And we'll change it to password. So now we have two fields. So let's add some CSS. Let's push this to center. Push this content to center. So I'll use a flexbox. Align items center and adjust the content to center. Should be justify content to center. Okay, now the content is center aligned. So now we have a plain HTML username and password. Okay, so we'll just add a submit button. Login, and we'll say type as a submit. So now we have login form. We'll just add a basic Bootstrap to align them better, or for now let it be. So now we have so username and password and the login button. This is plain HTML login. Now we'll add the Angular feature for this. Okay, to add Angular, first thing we need to add a ng form to it. So it will be ng form, and since we have a submit button, we need a submit. It will be ng submit, and we'll say submit login form, and we need this function to be added in the TypeScript file. So for now let it be, or we'll add. Okay, let it be for now. Okay, so now let's go to HTML again. So for this form, we need a data binding. To add this data binding for each field, to use this, so for first thing we'll add username. We are tying this particular field with the Angular ng model. Okay, and we need for two-way data binding, we need model equal to username. Okay, same thing, we need it for password. Okay, now let's create a user and tie this model to it. If you have more number of fields, we cannot separate them like this. Instead, we will add a user object and we'll tie that. So let me just create a user.ts file, and within this export class user. Within this I need a constructor, and for this constructor I'll pass public string, username string, comma, password as string, 2 parameters. Okay, now let's import this to TypeScript file. This is the user. So here what we will do is we'll assign a user, create a user with the same constructor by passing empty values to it. We'll import this TypeScript class. We'll tie this user in the HTML here. Okay, now let's try to print this content. To print this content we need value. I'm using a pipe to JSON. Okay, now we have this empty right now. So when I start typing, this data is tied to this particular Angular form. Okay, and right now I just created a basic form and attached it to ng model for username and the password. Okay, now let's add the form validations. Okay, right now once we add the form validations and then let it submit. Okay, right now it is allowing it to submit. So now let's add the form validations, then we will submit. Okay, so to add form validations, first and foremost thing, so we need to include a class dot is invalid. So this particular class is going to attach the it will make the text box to be red at the edge of the text box to in red color. Okay, for that, to enable that, we need username should be when the username is invalid and username is touched. Okay, for these two scenarios we will throw that error message in red color. Okay, if you see, let me just push this here, and we will add the same thing to password as well. Password. Let's see. Let's add Bootstrap form control. So right now we are using Bootstrap form control CSS to mark the form in red color. Now if you see, since I didn't enter any value, so it is throwing validation message and it is showing it like red. Okay, so it won't even let me submit. Okay, this is how we can add the validations. All we need to do is get hold of this is invalid and set this class to true if the username is invalid or if the username is touched and not entered anything. Okay, once you start typing, it will automatically go away. Okay, now like this. Okay, now what we will do is, let's submit this form. Instead of putting it here, let's simply submit this form and print that to the console, and in the next video we'll submit this full form to the backend. Okay, console.log, and it will have this .user. I'll use a control.table, console.table. Okay, now let's see the console. I'll enter username and password and submit. If you see username and password, the values came. So it right now. I consoled it. Let's look at Angular reactive forms. Let's understand the basics about reactive forms before we actually write the code and understand it better. So reactive forms are the other way of writing the Angular forms. And basically, as part of the reactive forms, the major logic is moved to the component class, and the form is created in component class and rendered onto the HTML. This is quite opposite to the template-based forms, and it won't support the two-way data binding because it won't use the ng model directive. And form validations also move to the component class, and it's adding additional feature like adding custom validations to the Angular form to validate the inputs like SSN number or this type of additional validations. And it is easy to read and understand, especially when it comes to the complex forms. Okay, so when to use the reactive forms? So basically, it can be used for any scenario, both for the smaller forms as well as the complex forms. And it can be used not only just to create the login page with a username and password. Instead, it can be used for the use cases like creating a LinkedIn profile where the user need to fill out all the details like personal details, residence details, and experience details, and any additional achievements. To provide all these details into a single form, the reactive form is much better for this type of large forms. And now let's create the Angular 17 project and write the reactive form and understand with the code. So now let's look at the reactive forms. And reactive forms can be created with a form builder or without using the form builder, just with the form group and the form controls. So let's start with the form group and form controls first. Then we will go for the form builder and we'll look at the use case for the form builder. To start with, I'll add a div for a registration form. I'll completely push this content to center. So display flux, line items center, align content center, so that the content will be center aligned. So within this, so I'll start with the form, and within this form, I'll add input type text. I'll just add a Bootstrap CSS just to make it look better, and it will be a form control. Okay, to use a form control, I need a form group. So I'll just add a form group. Within this form control, and I'll add a placeholder. It's for first name. Okay, I'll repeat this same 4 times. Okay, and I'll add it for last name. This will be an email, and let's grab the username, and I'll just add a button to submit. So button type is submit, and this is how the button closing. Maybe let's add btn. I don't remember the CSS name, but let's check. Okay, this is the same CSS. Okay, somehow it is not center aligned. CSS. Okay, this should be justify content. Now it should be aligned. Okay, now it is center aligned. Now right now I just created plain HTML form. There is nothing in it. Okay, now let's add the Angular feature Angular reactive form controls for this particular form. So to start with, this form should be named with form group. Okay, and the form group name is registration form. Okay, and basically this the way form group works is, form group, it will have multiple form controls and it will all of them grouped together as a form group. Okay, and now it is failing because there is no registration form here. Okay, let's say form group. Okay, now in the HTML, to make this HTML into Angular reactive form, so we need to add form control name. Okay, so this name is going to be first name. So let's add form control name for all the fields. Last name, email, username. Okay, now on the HTML side we are done. Okay, what we will do is we'll try to print this form data once it is typed. For that, form dot value, and we need a pipe, and convert this to JSON to print it. Okay, so on the HTML side, what we added is the form group name and form control name. So since we are not using any model here, so it will be only single way of binding. It's not going to work for two-way data binding with the form control name. Okay, now let's look at the changes on the TypeScript side. Okay, now we have this registration form group. Instead of this, what we will do is form group equal to new form group of, we'll add the fields here. Okay, so within this, like I said, every form group will have form controls, list of form controls. So it will become new form control. Okay, and the initial value will be empty. And let's copy paste this for 4 times for 4 fields, 2, 3, 4, and it will be last name, this is email, this is username. Okay, and now if you see, if you start typing something, now it will automatically bind it. Okay, email and username. Okay, and to set a default value, we can set it like this. Okay, on the page load, if you want to set test@email.com, username. Now with this, it will automatically input the values, default values on the page load. Okay, so if you want empty page, you should set it like this, empty form. Okay, this is the empty form. Now we added a basic form and tied with the form group, and this is the reactive form. Okay, this is the reactive form. For suppose there are few more things. For suppose if you want to set a default data coming from the API, okay, you want to set that. The way you can do it is, you can add implements on init, and you need to implement the ng on init. Within this, what you can do is, if you want to, you can make the API call here. Once you get the data, you can get hold of the registration form, and once you get the registration form, you can say set value, and within this you need to pass the registration form dot set value, and within this you need to set this particular JSON. Otherwise, if whatever the data that you get from the backend API, you can set it. Otherwise, you can say like this, and okay, now since this is called in ng100, these values are going to be loaded. Okay, and if there is a API call, you can make this API call here and set the value like this. Okay, there is one more thing that you need to notice. If I just want to set only first name and last name only, okay, this won't work with the set value. Okay, so to set only few fields, what you need to do is, you need to, instead of set value will accept the full form. Okay, instead you need to use patch value, so that it will set only two values. If you see, two values are set and you can type leftover fields. Okay, so this is the difference between set value and patch value. Okay, now let's look into the validations. So to add the basic validations, okay, let me just remove this piece right now. So this is what we have right now. Okay, to add the basic validation, you can say validators dot required. So it will force and it will set the field name to be mandatory. Okay, and along with this, what we need to do is, we need to add few minor things for this particular form control. Okay, we can use the Bootstrap CSS class, the one that we used in the template based forms. So class dot is invalid, it will set the red color bar for the text box. But to get hold of on what basis we are going to set this is, here registration form control dot get, we need to get hold of that particular field name. So for this one, it is a last name. Okay, dot, if this is invalid, for suppose if there is a first name field, then what we need to do is, we need to check whether it is invalid. Okay, not only this control, we need to add one more, whether it is touched or not. Okay, let's push this to next, and here we can add touched. Okay, this is for the last name, and let's add it for first name as well. First name, let's add the same for email and username as well. Okay, username, email, should be email. Now let's understand. So we are trying to apply this invalid CSS, which will apply the red color bar to the text box. Based on the condition, we are getting hold of the registration form and getting the field name, this field name, and checking whether it is invalid or not, and whether it is touched. Okay, that's when we are setting the red color bar. Let's look at it. So I'm touching this and going away. So now you see there is a validation applied. Okay, this is a basic validation for the reactive form. Let's look at the form builder and how we can create the dynamic form using the form builder. Okay, so to use the form builder, I need to inject the form builder here. Okay, and let's comment out this one for now. Okay, since right now I have form builder, so I'll create the registration form with the form builder. Okay, so this dot fb dot group, same form group, but we are creating with the form builder right now. Okay, and the same parameter that we can use. So if you see, the difference is here directly using form group, and here we are using form builder to create the form group. And I'll tell you why we need, what is the additional feature that form builder is giving. It will provide the feature to dynamically create the form and append the form with the new controls and remove new controls from the form. So it will be much easy. We will look at it once we done with the basic form group validations. Now I'll add address. So again I have to use form builder group, and within this, for now I'll add only two fields, city and state. Okay, now we have a form. So now we have form. Okay, since we don't have a address yet, so it is not displayed. Let's add the address. So to add the address, if you look at it, this is one more form group. Within this form group, there is one more form group. Okay. So for that, we have to say div form group name. Okay. Form group name is address. Okay. Within this, we'll just add just a label for address. Okay, now we can add the field names. So to add the field names, again, this should be city. There's one more, state. For the validations, it should be city and state and state. But these validations are not going to work. Why? Because this is the inner form group. Okay, so we have a form group here, the parent one. Within this, again, child. So to get hold of this particular field to apply the validation, there is one minor change that we need to do. Once we get this, okay, again we need to call. We can even call a get or directly refer this address dot state, address dot city. Okay, since it is a child form, we have to use it like this. Okay, child dot state and child dot city. Now this will apply the validations. See, now we applied the validation. Okay, this is how you can apply the validation. So right now we just added a validation. Let's see how we can add a message saying it is required. Okay, we'll just add one message, error message for this. Okay, to add the validation message, I'll just use a container, ng container, and we'll add a condition for this. We'll say first name is required. Okay, when do you want to display this? Just the same condition. In this scenario, I wanted to display. So what we will do is we'll simply add Angular 17 type of condition. Just to see. Now if you see, first name is required. Okay, this message came from here. Okay, based on this condition. This is Angular 17 version of if condition. Okay, what I'm saying, for the same error scenario where we are showing the red color border, if that satisfies, show this message also. So that for that reason it is showing. Okay, let's just simply say color red just to view it better. Okay, container is not applying, so we can simply add a span tag. We'll see. Okay, now if you see, this is how we can apply the validation and create the form with the form group. Okay, right now, since we know that there is only one address, okay, only one address, so we were able to easily add this address here with the form group name. But for suppose if you have a home address and work address, okay, or if there is a scenario where a person worked in 10 client locations, he wanted to add all the 10 experiences with 10 addresses. Okay, in that scenario, we don't know how many addresses that they are going to add. Okay, in this scenario, we need to update this form builder group and use form array. Okay, now let's look at it. Now let's look at how we can change this form to, instead of directly hard coding this address here, we'll add a dynamic way to add number of addresses to this. So for that, the first change that we need to do is we need to remove this. Okay, so in this address, we have to add this dot form builder dot array, so that we can add n number of addresses. So I'm just changing these two addresses and I'll just get rid of this one. Okay, and one more method that we need is get addresses with the same name. To get that whole array of addresses for this one, so to get the addresses, okay, we need to get, once we add multiple addresses, of course it will be added to registration form. So we need to get the addresses from the registration form by using its controls. So all these are form controls. Okay, first name, last name, email, and addresses. So we are trying to get hold of this form, and within that, the controls of what control that we need addresses. Okay, this is the control that I wanted to get hold of, and whatever I get from this, I wanted to pass as a form array. Of course it is array. So, and we need to import this form array. Okay, I will use this one in the UI HTML so that I can get hold of multiple addresses. But first thing, we need to add the address. So to add address, I need one more function. Okay, within this I will add actual address form. Okay, within this, of course, we have to use form group. Sorry, form builder. Sorry. Okay, form builder, and we need to create the group. And within this, what we'll do, we'll add city, initial value empty, validation dot required, and the same way we need to add state, the same state. Okay, when we click add, this address should be added to the addresses. So this dot addresses dot push, since it is array, can set this. So every time when we click add address, we will add one address. But for suppose if the user want to delete one address, or maybe unfortunately just clicking the add button, for that reason we need to add delete address function, but it should get the index of the array that we wanted to delete, so as a parameter. And to delete it, of course we are adding it to addresses, so definitely we have to delete it from the addresses only. So for this we will add the index to remove. Okay, this is the TypeScript side code. Now let's look at how we can render these addresses. Okay, as an initial step, first we'll add a button to add address. Okay, now click event, and of course we added a function add address. So this will just add a button on the UI. Okay, now what we will do, we'll just add a CSS class just to make it look better. Button btn success. Okay, now I have a button, but where exactly when I click the button, it will add the address, but we have to display that address, right? For that, we need to get hold of the form array name, which is addresses. This is the array. If you see, this is the array. Okay, I need to iterate this array and display. So this is the addresses. Within this, okay, I need one more div, and I need to iterate. Okay, for now I'll just use ng for older ng for loop. Let address of addresses. Okay, we need to add within these controls, addresses controls, we need to start with the index of I equal to index. Okay, along with this form group name. Okay, because we have multiple since we'll have multiple addresses, so for that reason we have to take each one and display. Okay, this is the way to loop this addresses. Okay, and once we have these addresses, we'll say input type text placeholder city, and we need a form control name. Form control name is city. Here, placeholder. Okay, we need city and state. State. As an initial step, it won't display any of the addresses because we are not setting any address in the initial go. Okay, let's see now. Now we have empty one. Now when you click address, it added a city and state. Okay, if you see, when I click address, I'm creating address form with these two fields and pushing it to addresses, which is internally going into the registration form and displaying on the UI. Okay, this is how it is. When I add multiple, it will keep on adding. Okay, and now for suppose I clicked it without knowing it, I just wanted to delete. Okay, for that again we need to add like the way we added this. Within this, when we are deleting it, we need to know the exact index of which address that I want to delete. Okay, for that reason we have to pass that ID. Okay, now when I add address and when I delete it, it will get deleted. Okay, now let's see how this will render the console. Okay, okay, now let's register. If you see, first name, last name, email, username and address as an array. Okay, within this city, and let's add one more. Okay, I'll say San Jose, California. Okay, when I click register, if you see the address, there will be multiple addresses. Okay, Dallas, Texas, San Jose, California. This is how it will. When I delete it, okay, and register, it will have only one. Okay, this is how you can use this farm array, and you can add multiple fields, or not only the farm group, you can even delete one particular control, add one particular control. This will give more ability for the developer to write a very good dynamic forms, and it will just add whatever is needed for that particular page to render faster in the on the first page load. Let's look into the HTTP module in Angular. So to make any API call in Angular, we need a HTTP module, and so to start with, we need to import the HTTP client module in main app.module.ts file to use the HTTP features for Angular application. And the second step is create a service and inject the HTTP client module for that service, so that by using HTTP client module, we can call the get method, or a post method, or a delete method, or a create method. So any sort of HTTP methods that we want to use. So Angular application connects with the server using HTTP module, and the server can be hosted on AWS, like AWS Lambda, or a Spring Boot application that is hosted on EC2. So any server, Angular communicates through the HTTP module only, and it will get the data by using get method. It will create the record using post method, likewise, and it will delete using delete method, and it will put using put method. So any Angular application that is rendered onto the browser will always communicate with the server using HTTP only. Okay, and let's look into each one with a code and a real-time example. So now let's look at how we can write the Angular services using HTTP. To start with, I'll start a div, and I'll add 3 different buttons to get a single post and to get all the posts, and to create a post. So for this, I didn't create any backend service, but I'm using this JSON placeholder API. This is a free API that anybody can use it. Okay, so I'm using this one. Okay, so this is a plain application that I have, which is empty now. Okay, so to start with, I'll add a button to get all posts, and click on this button. This is a function. and when I get all the posts, I just wanted to display. So for that, okay, let's add this function over here. So this should get all the posts. To get hold of the posts, I'll say any of array, because this is a list of posts that we are going to get. Okay, to write the service, the first and foremost thing, to use the HTTP, we have to use it. I'm creating a service, ng generate service. Since it is posts, I'm creating posts service. Okay, now I have this service. So within this service, the first and foremost thing that we need to do is inject the HTTP client module. Okay, to make the API call, we need to first inject the HTTP client. Okay, this is first step. But to use the HTTP features, we need to add a HTTP client module to the main module file. Otherwise, HTTP features are not going to work. Okay. So once we have this, let me just add get all posts. Okay. And what I'll do is it will be observable of any of array. This will be multiple records that we get. Or for now, let's say any. Okay. From this, let's run this dot HTTP dot get, and I need this URL to get all the posts. Since I'm using this JSON placeholder, I'll use this URL. I'll just define it like base URL. Okay, I'll say base URL. Okay, so the base URL plus I want to get all the posts. Okay, I can say this dot. Okay, this will return me all the posts from here. Okay, whatever you're seeing, user ID, title, body with all the list of records. Okay, and now I'm going to call this. Before I call this method, I need to first inject the service into the constructor. It is post service, so I'm importing this post service and inject it into the constructor. Now I can call this method get all posts. Since it is observable, I need to subscribe to it. Okay, once I subscribe, I'll get the data in the pipe format. Once I get, I need to assign this data to list of posts. Okay, right now I have posts. This is a list. Okay, once I get this, I'll print it onto the console. Okay, how I can do that is, since it is a list, I'll use Angular 17 for loop, post of posts, track by the post ID. So track post.id. Okay, and while I for loop it, I'll just use the template just to display. Okay, if it is empty, so no posts available. So within this, I'll have a post.id, post.user ID, post.title, and post.body. Okay, ID, user ID, title, and body. These are the 4 fields. Okay, that's what I used. Now let's run and see. Okay, when I click this one, I should get all the list of posts. Okay, it is not working. Let's see why is this not working. In the network, so we got all the posts. So we got the list of posts. Okay. Now since this is outside, okay, let's just check. Let's put it here. Okay, for now let's remove the template and let's just use the div. So right now there are no posts. When I click this one, I got all the list of posts. Okay, it is not properly formatted, but okay, these are the total list of posts. Instead of this, we can use a table and display, but right now let it be. Okay, so this is how we can make the API call. Okay, right now we are getting all the posts, right? Okay, let's try to get only single post. Okay, I'll just get rid of this piece. Okay, we need a single post. Okay, if there is a post, else no posts. Okay, within this, let's cut this piece, put it here. Now get post by ID. We'll get single post. Okay, for this one we need a input type, input text box, input text. I'll use ng model, post ID. Okay, since we don't have post ID here, it is failing. Say string, or we can define empty string. Okay, now we got a text box. Okay, now let's write this function. So in the service right now we don't have a function to get a single post. Okay, now let's change this one to get single post. Okay, get post by ID. Of course we will get a post ID here, and we'll say string. Okay, now so the base URL plus the post ID. Okay, now this dot post service dot get post by ID. We pass the post ID here. It is of string. Pass it here. Then it is observable. So we have to subscribe, and we get a single post data. And once we receive it, we'll assign this to a post. Okay, and we don't have a single post here, post object, so let's use this. Okay, now we got the post. Now we can print it here. Okay, let's see. Right now it is saying no post. Why? Because there is no post. Why? Because if you see, if there is a post, then only display it. If there is no post, just say no posts. Okay, now when I pass one value and get it, I got the first post data. Okay, now let's get the second one. See, you see, we got the second one. Now let's see, 4, we got the fourth post. So this is how we can get a single post, by passing the parameter. Okay, and also there are other ways to pass the parameter. Okay, so instead of passing it here directly, we can say let HTTP parameters, HTTP params object you can create, and you can directly set it here. Okay, like the property name, okay, and the value. This is how also you can set. When you set like this, you cannot pass this one here. Instead, you should say parameters, and you should say pass the parameters. Okay, this is how you can pass it. And if there are any authentication token or something, you can say authentication parameters like this. See, new HTTP headers. This is the headers, and you can set HTTP parameters. Most probably the authorization token that we pass usually. Okay, you can say token here. Okay, you can pass the token. Also, you can set these parameters here. Okay, now it is. Okay, if you see headers, for this headers you can set this. Okay, now it will work. So this is how you can pass the parameters and authentication parameters. If you have single parameter, you can directly set it. But if you have multiple parameters, you can set it like this, like not set again, and you can add more parameters here. Okay, now let's see how we can create a post. Okay, so let me just remove this. Okay, we don't need a text box. Let's say create post. Create the post object directly in the component. Okay, this dot posts service dot create post. Right now there is no method in it, so that it is not, it is throwing error. Okay, once we create it, we get that return this dot post equal to created post. Okay, let's create the method in the posts service. Okay, since we don't have anything, let's directly create a post object here. Okay, since we have different parameters, ID, you can say 1, user ID 1, title, you can say title, and body, you can say post body. Okay, let's say 111 111. Okay, we got the post. Now to create it, this dot, okay, this dot http dot post method that we have to use. Okay, this is a post method, and within this the base URL comma the body object which is post. Okay, this will create the post. Okay, and for once we create this post, we are returning the data. Let's see whether it is working, and we just, okay, I doubt whether it will work because we don't know whether we can create the post to this dummy JSON. Body ID, title, user ID, ID, title, body. So basically, since this is dummy API, we don't know whether we can directly create it. Okay, we don't know whether we can create it. Okay, but this is how you can write the post method here. Okay, you can post and pass the body, and additionally if you want to set the parameters, this is how you can set. And along with this, see parameters, and if you see headers, this is how you can set the headers. Okay, let's discuss the state management in Angular. So the state management meaning how do we hold the data on the UI side, and that is what is called state management. And there are 3 different ways in Angular to maintain the state on the UI side. The first one is local storage, and the second one is session storage, and the third one is using service. So out of these 3, the third one, which is service, Angular service, that is the best way to implement the state management, because local storage and session storage are going to store the data on the browser itself, and it will prone to security issues. So better option is to go with service. Now let's look into all these 3 options with the code examples. Now let's look at local storage first. Okay, so for that I am just adding a button. Okay, add to local storage, and I'll add a button click event, add to local storage. Okay, for this I need a function here. Within this, what I'll do is I'll say local storage dot set item, and it will take a key and a value. I'll say message, I'll say it is confidential. Okay, and I'll print that message over here just for our viewing purpose. Once I do this, I'll get the same message and display it on the page just for our convenience. Okay, right now this dot message equals to local storage dot get item, and I'll pass this message to get and display on the UI. Okay, here I'm setting it to the local storage. It will maintain it in the local, and I'm getting it printing onto the UI. Let's see. I click this, the message I got. Okay, when I click this button, this particular function was called setting it, getting it. This looks fine, but there is a big problem. If you open inspect, go to the application, go to local storage, check here, the message, it is confidential. This is added to the browser. Okay, so if you set the data to local storage, it will be captured at browser, and it is big security threat, and intruders can write a JavaScript code and get hold of this local storage easily. Okay, now let's look at the session storage. I'll just say, just changing it to session. Okay, now this is session storage. Instead of local, we use session storage here. Okay, same thing. Now let's check. Adding it to session storage, it is confidential. Again, let's go to the developer tool, application. You see session storage on here. When you click here, again you are able to see the message. So local storage and session storage are going to hold the data in the browser, and it is visible. Okay, so better not to use these two for session management at all. Session management meaning once you log in, you have authentication token. You want to keep the token as long as you are logged into the application, because when you navigate from one page to another page, you need token to be passed, and if there is any API call, we have to pass the token to that. So for that type of scenario, we need a state management, but we should never use local storage or session storage. Okay, now the third way to store the data is, or maintaining the session, is using service. Okay, now let's remove this. Okay, button click, add to service. Okay, service is Angular feature. Okay, now I need to create a service. I'll say data storage service. Okay, now we have a service. Within this service, what I'll do is I'll set a message. Okay, and here I'll say set message of string. I'm going to set it to message. Okay, it will be held in service and it cannot be visible on the browser from the developers tool. Now to get this message, I'll use a get method. Okay, and I'll return the message. Okay, now I'll inject this service into the constructor of the component. Okay, and this dot storage service dot, I'll set the message first, then I'll get it. Okay, I'll set a message. It is confidential, and again I'll get this message and assign it to this message field. let's say get message. Okay, now let's check this one. I clicked, I got the message, it is set to service and got it from service. Okay, but this data cannot be visible here. Okay, this is the old data, not the current one. So even after clearing the cache, if you see local storage and session storage data is not cleared. So that's why we should never set the data to local storage or session storage. Okay. Now let's go to incognito mode. Okay. I added the message. I got the message. But if you see, there is nothing stored in the browser at all completely. Okay. There is nothing stored in the browser. Okay. It is saved at the service level. Okay. We are setting it to the service. So this is the best way. A service is best way to maintain the state management in Angular application. You should always set the data to service and get it wherever it is needed. You should never ever set the data to local storage or session storage. Okay. That's all from this session. Thank you.